I'm Brother Bob Pauline. Thank you for joining us on this podcast episode of That's in the Bible. Let's go straight to our first question for today, which comes to us via email from Odessa in San Diego, California. Her question is, why does the Church of Christ use different versions of the Bible to answer questions? Odessa, thank you very much for your question. The Church of Christ uses not any one particular Bible, for example, our own translation, and say we will just use this version. No, we will use any and many different translations. And it's important to note they are translations because the original writings that God inspired His chosen writers were written in Hebrew. The Old Testament is in Hebrew, and the New Testament is primarily in Greek with some sprinkles of Aramaic. And those translators over the years, there have been many who have translated from those original languages. And as long as the translator did not deviate from what was originally written in Hebrew, what was originally written in Greek, and the manuscripts that we have from those original Hebrew and Greek writings, well then, that is truly Bible. If ever there are translations that are slightly different from one another, did God give any instruction to use so one can be sure what they're receiving is accurate and pure? He gave this instruction recorded by Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 2. Now let's listen together to what's recorded here in verse 13 of that chapter. These things we also speak, not in words which man's wisdom teaches, but which the Holy Spirit teaches, comparing spiritual things with spiritual. The rule of God then, Odessa, is that spiritual things must be compared with spiritual things. What then is recorded here are spiritual truths. And to know for sure that what is recorded there is accurate, the instruction is to compare these spiritual things with spiritual things. Because what if one does not accept these spiritual truths? 1 Corinthians 2:12 gives this insight. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might know the things that have been freely given to us by God. What's one thing we must not do when comparing the spiritual truths with spiritual truths? We must not accept the things of this world, man's wisdom, man's opinions, man's ideas. We have to follow the instruction that God has given, because how will the world receive these spiritual truths from God? Verse 14. But the natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, nor can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. That's why many would consider the spiritual truths in the Holy Scriptures as just foolishness. But here in the Church of Christ, we will use that law of God, comparing spiritual things with spiritual things. We read often, for example, Acts 20:28 on this program and other programs of the Church of Christ, wherein it makes mention that Christ, the church, the name of the church, Church of Christ, was purchased with His blood. If we read other translations, it will say Church of God, purchased with His blood. Church of the Lord, purchased with His blood. What then are we to do? Applying what we just read, the instruction of the Lord, compare spiritual things, spiritual truths with spiritual truths. God is a spirit. Christ is the one that had flesh and bones and blood. So we are very sure then to use the translations of the Bible that will say Church of Christ, which He purchased with His blood, because it's Christ that had blood. Comparing the spiritual things with spiritual things, there will never be a conflict. There will never be any confusion. So applying that rule, which we do in the Church of Christ, Odessa, we will always come to the knowledge of the truth. Thanks for listening. I'm Brother Bob Pauline, and we hope you join us next time on That's in the Bible. Please feel free to email your questions to answer@incmedia.org. For more programming of the Iglesia Cristo Church of Christ, and to find a local congregation near you, please visit incmedia.org.